Hello, everyone. Today we are joined by May Nasrallah. May is the founder and chief executive at deNovo Corporate Advisors. May is also a non executive chairman and senior advisor at BlackRock in the Middle East. Before founding deNovo, May spent nearly 16 years at Morgan Stanley. In her last role, she was the head of investment banking for the MENA region. She was the youngest woman to be named managing director at Morgan Stanley, as well as the first Arab woman managing director at the bank. May has also been ranked one of the 50 most influential women in the Middle East. May graduated with a bachelor's in economics and political science from MIT. She then went on to receive her MBA from MIT Sloan School of Management. May, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Saeeda. Thank you for having me.
May, you've had a fantastic journey. You started off in a in a fantastic technical institute. You were gone all the way to 16 years, Morgan Stanley. You've set up your own thing. You've done a lot of things that a lot of us aspire to do. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
It's always tough to talk about the journey because you never know where you're going to get to when you start it. You get on that train and the train takes you in directions that you never thought what you're going to end up at. But, just very briefly, I was born in Lebanon. I grew up in Lebanon up until the civil war started. And then my family moved to Kuwait. So I did all my high schooling in Kuwait until the invasion happened. Iraq invaded Kuwait. And then I went and studied in the US. I actually thought I was going to become a doctor or at least biotech or something along those lines, which is where I went to MIT. And then, as luck would have it, you find yourself in a different, completely different, um, career path than you would have ever expected. I ended up taking economics courses with professors that I just adored, and they were all Nobel Prize laureates, people like Modigliani and Samuelson and Solow and Dornbusch and Krugman and you name it. All of these professors were there at MIT, so I ended up falling in love with the topic and ended up with a degree of economics. And similarly, political science. I had another degree in political science simply because I wanted to figure out how our world was functioning. Countries invading one another, civil wars, and just curiosity got a hold of me. And then I did my master's, and my professor at the time, again, Modigliani, kept telling me, you should try finance. You should try to see part of the group that actually dictates how economies work, or not dictates, but sort of help translate how economies work, how financial markets work. And it's an interesting part of it. And that's where I ended up interviewing and was privileged to get an offer from Morgan Stanley. And I started working. I thought I would do it for a few years. 16 years old, I was still there. And I looked at, frankly, Morgan Stanley as a continuation of my whole education because I ended up being with them in New York and Hong Kong and London and Dubai and different divisions and in different functionalities, M&A, project finance, liability management, restructuring, acquisition financing, LBOs. I mean, you get to learn a lot with these large firms. I think that's what's the beauty of part of these types of organizations is that you get to experience the world, literally the world with them. And then eventually coming back, finding myself back into this region was wonderful. It's great to be here. It's great to be part of helping this part of the world, evolve and grow and it's just a lot of different, frankly, circumstances that have put me where I am today.
That's fantastic. In fact, in your last role at Morgan Stanley, you were the head of investment banking for the Middle East. I remember you mentioned that when you were first offered that role, you politely tried to decline it. What made
I did.
you want to not do that role?
Until it was maybe the old-fashioned traditionalist in me thinking that this part of the world would not be that open to having a woman in that role. And so when our chairman at the time, John Mack, approached me with it, and he said, I'd love for you to try to do this. I said, well, you really need a guy for that job. I mean, investment banking, Middle East, you want a guy there. And he said, no, you're the right guy for the job. and then so I, and then I said something that women typically use as a last order of business, which is to say, well, I'm pregnant, which I was at the time, and I hadn't informed him. I said, okay, that doesn't change anything. You're still the right guy for the job. Um, I didn't think that a woman could function in this role. And interesting enough, Saida, you and I are still women functioning in this role in this part of the world. But back then, in 2005, I wasn't sure that I could function. that people would listen to me, that I would be able to do my job the way that I had been used to doing it in the Western world. But in all honesty, I was wrong. I was very, very wrong because people did um, greet you, people did welcome you, people did listen to you, and people did recognize that you're an Arab woman in that role, and that meant something to them as well. So long as you knew what you were doing, and I'd be curious to hear about your experiences as well, but so long as you knew what you were doing, so long as what comes out of your mouth was correct, sensical, and professional, and advice was in its right place, people actually remembered you. You're the only girl in the room half the time, so they remembered you, and then they simply were very welcoming and encouraging. And so I found it actually a breath of fresh air to be here. And you can see the fact that I stayed long after Morgan Stanley. I stayed in this region because it is a region that I care a lot about. And the respect that they have for women is something that is to be commended, particularly nowadays when they're encouraging women to be in senior positions as well.
Yeah. Well, look, absolutely agree with you on that, May. It's there's always a misconception that it's not easy operating as a woman in this part of the world, and there are elements of truth to it, yes. But I think
Correct.
net there is a lot more that is in favor of being a woman here than anywhere else. As you said, the amount of respect that a woman gets in this part of the world, I have not
Yeah,
seen that in many other places. And you and I have both operated in multiple different geographies. The
yeah,
level of safety and security, which working as a woman, to me, that's paramount. I'm out at all time, right? Early morning, late night for work. I don't want to have to think about my safety at the time, and I never have to
completely.
living in this part of the world. So absolutely, I think there are so many pluses and so many advantages to being to being here, and it's exactly as you said, as long as the substance is there, as long as the merit is
Absolutely.
there. So
Absolutely.
100% agree
I-
with that.
I'll tell you one funny story though. And early on in my time over here, you're used to going out and inviting clients for luncheons. And I would
Yes.
do that. I would go invite a client to a lunch, and they would never let me pay. It was the oddest thing because chivalry continues to carry on weight here. And it was funny because every time I come back to my assistant, she's like, okay, where's your receipt? I'm like, oh, I don't have one. Don't have one. So it was actually quite a nice change from what I was used to, which is no, you would just like anybody else would. But it was
Yeah,
actually quite
indeed. It's a You have to also embrace the fact that you are a woman,
completely.
right? And that's okay. That's different, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So one of the things that you did, I think a lot of people have thought about doing, but few have actually done, which is you had an incredibly successful career when you were back at Morgan, but you decided to leave and set up something of your own. And
Yeah.
you have for many years now been doing that and been doing it very successfully. Tell us a little bit about what that was like and what inspired you to go out on your own and do something.
Tell you, it was one of the most difficult decisions that I've had to take. I was in a great role at Morgan Stanley. It is a great firm, and I really enjoyed my time there. And the idea of leaving it was something that I sort of never took easily. It took me 6 months of tossing and turning in bed until my husband told me just get out and do something about it. But my thought was this came at a time, if you recall, say, when the financial crisis hit. It hit us here in 2009, and the whole world was shaken by it, and a lot of banks fell under, and even Morgan Stanley got close at one in time, having a sort of a big issue as well. And as a result of all of that, the large banks shifted, frankly, their strategy in this region. They no longer wanted to be the end all and be all in this region because we had set up a huge practice in the UAE to cover the entire region, and we had grown it quite meaningfully. We're doing a lot of activities, and back then the shift was quite dramatic because it was about survival, it was about instinct, it was about going back to the core.
Right.
And it wasn't about sort of doubling down on this region. And I wanted to double down on the region. I wanted to spend a lot more time and effort to be part
Hmm.
of giving back to the community and the region that I'm part of and I grew up in and belong to. And I wanted to give advice. I wanted to give advice to the regional groups that needed to, at that point in time, were having trouble. They needed to either merge or acquire or sell or restructure or fund, or they needed help. And it was a time where we weren't as willing at Morgan Stanley at back then to give that help because the focus was different at that point. And that's when I took the decision to say, you know what, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to get out of my comfort zone and try to
Mm,
do this. I'd like to create the Rothschilds of the Middle East or the Lazards of the Middle East, or I would like to do a homegrown concept that would help advise the regional groups on where they needed to go, how were they thinking about their strategic growth or the financial development, and be part of helping them get to where Europe got to when a lot of people helped advise the companies
right,
over there, the founders over there, etc. And that was my thinking. I wanted to give sort of the Morgan Stanley service where not necessarily the bulge brackets wanted to go. And I was lucky enough and privileged enough that a number of my team members actually took the bold step to join me. Clearly, after my non-competes and non-solicits, and not everything else in the world expired, but after that, it became a real journey, a wonderful journey to create a new setup, a new platform, a new identity, and give advice the way that I knew how to give advice, in the best way that I could. And that's been the journey over the past 10 years. It's been a privilege to do that.
absolutely. And I think as a result of that, frankly, you've been on some of the most leading transactions in the region. In fact, you recently completed one of the first transactions in the region, which was listing Remy in New York in a
That's right.
spec.
Yes.
So we're continuing to trailblaze and innovate as we go.
No, that's great. Look, this region has a long history, and I think it's about time that the world sees a lot of what it has because it's got a lot of great assets. It's got a lot of great ideas. And I think we've oftentimes been the victim of um, dare I say, geopolitics that actually takes away from the achievements of what our corporates and our businesses and our entrepreneurs have done. Anything that we can do to help change that narrative and help create a better story and help create the longevity and the growth and the ability for these groups to end up in the multi-billion dollar category. Why not? And so I think it's part of our duty, frankly, to help make sure that these types of things happen and then the world sees us in a different light.
Yeah, absolutely. Many more to come.
Yeah.
So you have recently added another role to your already very busy schedule. You are now the non-executive chairman for BlackRock in the region. Tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that.
So that's actually been a real great additional part of the journey that I'm on and continue to be on. BlackRock is a wonderful organization. It's the largest asset manager in the world by any stretch. It's close to $9 trillion of assets under management. It's a heavyweight in whichever way you look at it. And to have the privilege to being asked to become their non-executive chairman and senior advisor for the region is something that was hard to say no. And it added for me a part of a skill set, if you want, that I don't have, which is asset management. I've been an investment banker all of my career. And it
Mm,
was actually quite interesting to then open my eyes to the world of asset management and to think again about how do we take a great organization like BlackRock with everything that it has to offer and offer it into this region in a broader way than it had traditionally done so. And I think there's a lot of skill set, knowledge, background, creativity, capability that that organization has in its toolkit. And I think our region also can benefit from understanding how do we sort of better optimize whether it's our investments, whether it's our cash management, whether it's our treasury function, our investments, our even, just how we look at our own pension planning, how do we look at our own, growth as a capital market, there's so many things that can be enhanced. And if I can be part of allowing that glue or that sort of connectivity between those two, that's certainly something that appeals to me. And I found I needed to find the time to do it. And it's something that I'm enjoying being part of a lot as well.
fantastic. So how has the pandemic shaped and impacted a lot of the business that you're doing and a lot of the clients that you're advising?
When the pandemic first hit, it felt like a deer in the headlight for all of us, frankly. I mean, us as and I'm sure you would sympathize with this comment, but everybody panicked in the beginning. Our clients just didn't know what to do. They didn't know whether they're going to get paid for their own business. They didn't know whether they're going to continue in their functionality. They just didn't know, and we didn't know what to tell them at that point in time necessarily when it first hit because there was no longer any clarity. So any business plan that we had for any organization, you know what, you might as
Yeah.
well shelf that because you don't know how things are going to evolve. So it became a
Yeah.
little bit difficult to understand, okay, how do we continue sale processes when we have no idea whether the budgets are going to be met or not? How do you continue acquisition processes when you don't know whether something's going to be what it is that you think it's worth historically? So there's a period of time where everything kind of just stopped.
Mm.
And then, interestingly enough, everything started again in a very meaningful way because, in all honesty, nobody felt that they could stand still. So you had this uncertainty, you had this COVID hit, you don't know necessarily what the future is going to look like. You also know that you can't stand still because if you stand still, you're going to lose. So you needed to merge, you needed to cut costs, you needed to restructure, you needed to organize, you needed to capitalize, you needed to do something. And so we became incredibly busy helping these clients think through how do they go through this uncertainty period, but how do they come up stronger for it? How do they end up surviving it? How do they end up even capitalizing? If there's, I mean, I hate to use the word capitalizing because it's sort of have a negative connotation to it, but just trying to find a business model that services or you know is needed for this environment that we're in. And so we ended up being busier than we've ever been. And we've been lucky enough to have been able to, to, to close transactions in the middle of all of this. One interesting one, we had a client out of Hong Kong that hired us
Mm.
over Zoom. We executed the transaction over Zoom. The counterparty was in Abu Dhabi and we couldn't go visit him. So we dealt with them over Zoom. And then we closed it with a celebration over Zoom. So would you have ever seen something like that
Mashallah.
happen before? It was actually quite interesting. I've never physically seen our client, and historically that would have never been the case. I would have been on a plane to Hong Kong. I would have been on a car, on the ride to Abu Dhabi. So we're in a
Yeah.
different world. And it also taught us another thing, which is we can actually have full-time employees sitting in other parts of the world if necessary. So we
Yeah.
during the whole COVID era, I told everybody that they could go wherever they're comfortable being. Some went to be with family, some,
Yeah.
decided to be in different countries, etc. And we didn't lose a single minute of efficiency. If anything, we were more efficient. And that, if you had ever told me that 2 years ago, I'd tell you you're smoking something. It's never going to happen. But now I feel like it's true. It can happen. We've hired some people in Lebanon now to work
Yeah.
with us because Lebanon is going through what it's going through and it's got such great talent. And we said, why not? And if that's a model that can work, we're going to continue that type of model. Um, so we're all working differently. It's just it's a very different. Um, it's been an eye-opening experience about what we could do and how we could do it. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I think we're missing human connectivity. We're missing that interaction. And I think at some point in time, we're going to need to come back to congregate again and be able to sort of see one another again and do things in group formats again. Inshallah, that day is going to come towards, maybe in the latter part of this year, hopefully.
Inshallah, inshallah. No, look, you're right. I think we've been able to adapt and deliver in ways that genuinely most of us didn't think would be possible had we been asked about this pre-pandemic. But we
Yeah.
have managed, we have kept up, but it has taken a bit of a toll on many, many people in many, many ways. So once things are, I don't want to say normal because I think there will be some fundamental changes based on what's happened. But I think once we reach the next normal, once we reach the next level of wherever we're going to be, I think it's important that we just take it and we just try and figure out the next step as in the best way possible.
No, absolutely. And keep in mind, people have been permanently scarred. There are people who have lost their lives, or people who've lost family members, people who have loved ones. And
Yeah,
that's something that will live with us for a long time to come. And I think we just need to, as a community, be able to come together and try to sort of face all of this and try to get stronger for it, try to
absolutely.
create a better way for all of us to function going forward. But it's been a tough year, that's for sure.
It is. It is. And I think it's had an impact on all of us, right? Grown ups,
Yeah.
kids, all of us. In fact, I mean, kids, I know you're a mother of four boys, so mashallah, and all at different stages in life, right? And from helping them
Yeah.
prepare to get ready for university to planning birthday parties, I mean, how do you manage four boys?
Manage is a strong word. and, and outnumbered is what I feel all the time. But I have to say, the important ingredient, frankly, is having a supportive network around you. I have a very supportive husband. My husband spends as much time with the kids as well, and takes care of a lot of and with boys you need they need a father figure to be present, and my
Yeah.
husband is enrolled. And then you have a support system of doing things efficiently around you, and you have to get used to honestly and living with the guilt, living with the guilt that you're not spending as much time as you would like to with them,
Yeah.
and that as we said, perhaps other mothers look at you differently because you're not spending as much time on all of their activities as well. But
Yeah.
I think my boys are stronger for it. I think they are independent. I spend every moment of free time that I can with them. Um, and it's a matter of just continuing to try to balance, but I think you're balancing different things at different times. So there's times that you have to dedicate for your work, there's time that you have to dedicate for your family, there's time that you have to dedicate towards different things, and you just need to make sure that at any point in time, at least that everything is floating. Let's put it that way. You're not, your head is just above water, and making sure that everything is functioning as it
Yeah.
should. Um, and just always try to do your best by everybody around you. But I think there's a magic solution. If anybody figures that out, I'd love to know. But I think it's always about making sure that you're keeping juggling different things in a way that can keep everyone
Yeah.
safe, happy, and functioning, both at job
Yeah.
and at home.
Yeah. No, makes a lot of sense. May,
Yeah.
what would be your advice to some of the younger women and men that are just starting out?
My advice would be to really show your skill set, your capabilities. The most important thing is to be able to be um, a good, if you want, corporate citizen, someone that does what needs to be done, that someone that can, do the work well and efficiently, and not worry necessarily about where you go to next. But for sure, I would always say that you should keep in mind having interconnectivity with people, having an advocate, an internal advocate, always that is aware of what you're doing. Equally, I would suggest that you would have a mentor. I had mentors along the way. I had many mentors that actually helped me in my career path, both from within my organization and from outside of my organization. I think it's always good to have people that you can connect into and be able to speak to what it is that is concerning you, what you have in mind, what you want to do. But I would certainly say that it is important in this environment that you know work work hard is not a bad thing. Working hard is, I mean, I worked hard my entire career. I see it a little bit in my children's generation that they necessarily don't think that working hard is the right solution. But I think there's no getting over that. I think spending the time to do what you need to get done so you can gather the skill set. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about the skill set. When you do the work, you get the skill set. Once you get the skill set, you'll be able to advance. And once you advance, you'll be able to, you know what I mean? Like it's a whole kind of path that you need to get on. But I would certainly say that keep in mind that you should connect, in our industry in particular, connecting with people is very important. Being someone that people want to work with, enjoy being around is very important. Being someone that is competent is very important. Hard and ethical and keeps that kind of high standard is very important. So when you combine all of these together, I think I would I would think that anybody can have a wonderful career ahead of and keep growing as such. But in an environment like the one that we're in,
Hmm.
unfortunately, the younger generation needs to learn how to do things alone more than within that setup because people are sitting at home working. So it's harder for them to learn by osmosis because many times when you're sitting in like the organizations that we sit in where there's spaces where people congregate and people can think laterally, so to speak, right, think around different things because they're hearing other people speak. They're not
Right.
getting the benefit of that as much right now, so they have to sort of unfortunately sort of try harder on their own to try to gather that in whichever way that they can. And it's our
Yeah.
duty to try to make sure that there's a setup for them to be able to get a bit of that as well.
Fantastic. Wonderful words. Thanks a lot, May. It's been a pleasure having you today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time. Pleasure being with you and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Bye bye.